The Mayo Experience.
That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog Fantasy, Scottish Open, the Genesis Scottish Open, research, picks, and early preview. We're going to guess the odds towards the end of the show. Reminder to use code Mayo at Underdog Fantasy to get a deposit bonus of up to $250. And as the back end of this audio podcast, I'm going to throw on a show I did with Alex Blickel about Royal Troon. We did it on a simulator. I'm going to throw the video up on Mayo Media Network as a bonus show. It didn't turn out great due to audio and internet problems, but we did have a chat back and forth. Blickel plays the first 9 holes of Royal Troon on a simulator. We're trying something different here with some of the content that we're doing. So as a bonus show, I'm going to throw it out anyway. You can choose to watch it if you want to. I really enjoyed doing it. I think there's something there with that format. We just need to perfect it and get the technology down, but we were not able to do it this time around. So, give it a chance. See if you like the format, if we can try to perfect it so it's not as laggy as it was as we did it this time through. But we're going to have a bunch of Open Championship previews. I'm going to have Jack Humphreys and Tom Jacobs on to do the first look towards the end of the week. And then it's all the regular stuff, the research show, the betting show, best bets, everything, Cut Sweat Live next week. So a ton going on for the Open Championship, but we're not going to overlook the Scottish Open because this is a field. Now, it's 156 players, and it's not a signature event. However, this is essentially what signature events should look like, in my opinion. So it's a combo event between the DP World Tour and the PGA Tour. So there's a lot of just random European players popping up in this field that maybe you're not as familiar with if you don't follow the DP World Tour. But we don't have Scotty in the field, so that hurts a little bit. Now, Cantlay's not playing. He got injured at before the John Deere, decided to pull out. He's getting himself ready for the Open Championship. So we are missing some big names from this field from the PGA Tour, but most of them are playing. And then you get this upper crust from the DP World Tour, and then a few other qualifiers and sponsors exemptions. Tom Kim is playing on a sponsors exemption. I don't quite understand how that works, considering he has multiple wins on the PGA Tour. I think he's ranked inside the top 20 in the world right now, but according to the field list, he got a sponsor's exemption. I'm glad that he is playing in this tournament, obviously, but it's just weird to see that he took one of those spots from potentially someone else. And then you get the mid-tier of everyone from the PGA Tour. Maybe we don't need 156 players for signature events, but having 120 like the old Heritage, Memorial, whatever it might be, I think is better off for these events, at least for viewership. And I love the NBC coverage of both the Scottish Open and the Open Championship, which I will alternate between saying Open Championship and British Open because I am not in Europe. I am in North America. We say British Open over here, although I know the Open, hashtag the Open is the hashtag that you're going to use, and then Brits get very upset if you call it the British Open and not the Open Championship. It doesn't really matter all that much. I'm probably going to title all the shows British Open because most of my viewers are in North America. Shout out to all of you around the world. Really appreciate you coming in. Leave those ratings and review, especially in countries where basically if it's not Canada or the US and you're listening to this or watching this from one of those countries, each rating and review that you give really helps us out on the charts, especially Australia and Ireland. We've seen a big bump in Portugal. Whenever I talk about Johnny Vegas, Venezuela just pops up on the list. We bring up Neiman, Chile, all of a sudden is doing really well for us. So if you're international and consuming the Pat Mayo Experience, you can't use code Mayo because Underdog is not available in those places. But if you just left a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it would be fantastic news for helping the discovery of this show. And the big thing about the simulator show, it's a bonus show. And that's one of the good things that Underdog has provided for us so far since joining them. And we're hoping we can do a lot more. We were trying to stage a 2v2 live Underdog tournament with me and Cuss versus Jeff and Kenny or something like that. We're going to work on that maybe for next year to try to get the logistics down. But yeah, like I said, with the simulator show, we just kind of did a run through. We know where we can improve on it and what we need to improve now. So maybe in the future for future major championships or hell, even tournaments, maybe we can make it a regular show with Blickel, who's really good at golf, by the way. He's I didn't hit it well. I hit it 330. It's thanks, pal. Thanks for really rubbing it in all of our faces with this. But for the Scottish Open this week, this field is really good. I mean, it's fun that Scotty's not here because because, Scotty be 3-1. You're like, oh, do I bet anyone besides Scotty? But having a full field event with a real cut at a course, which is just genuinely fun to watch. It's so different at the Renaissance Club. So let's take a look at the course right now. The Renaissance Club is where they have played the 5 previous editions of the Scottish Open, dating back to when it was just a DP World Tour event. And we would get a splattering of PGA Tour players who would go over because it's the week before the Open Championship. You get acclimated to the time zone, you get acclimated to the turf. You can be like Colin Morikawa and be like, I can't hit an iron off this turf whatsoever. And then no one bets you at the Open Championship, and then you win the Open Championship. But in 2019, Bernd Wiesberger ended up being victorious at -21. Aaron Rai, hot fire Aaron Rai. We'll see how he ends up faring at the John Deere Classic, playing in the final group going into Sunday. He won at -11. It was very difficult that year. I believe Fleetwood and Fitzpatrick. I think Fleetwood lost in the playoff to Ryan. Fitz ended up missing it by a stroke, but the wind just started wreaking havoc on everyone. And we saw that last year as well when Rory won. Min Woo Lee won in 2021 at -18. He surged on Sunday, posted a number, and no one could catch him. Xander won at -7 in 2022, and Rory won at -15. One clear of Robert McIntyre a year ago. It would have been a better story if Bobby Mack ended up winning in his home country and made that amazing shot on 18, and then Rory followed it up with I think it was a 210-yard 2-iron on the final hole to ended up closing it out. I had money on Hatton last year, and he, I believe, duffed a shot from the middle of the fairway, like a wedge in, and that was sort of the end of him. So just to kind of recap a little bit from last year, 2023, Rory's best round came on Thursday, where he finished 3 off the pace, and while his scores got progressively worse as the week went along, he was able to hang on. Bobby Mack picked up 4 shots on him on Sunday, but he still couldn't catch up to Rory. He ended up coming in elite form with 5 straight top 10s. A T7 at the Travelers was his most recent performance going into the Scottish Open, and Tom Kim, who finished in 6th, along with Tommy Fleetwood, are the only 2 players to finish in the top 10 each of the past 2 years at the Scottish Open. Kim finished a solo 3rd in 2022, while Fleetwood finished top 4. Those are the 2 years that it's been a co-sanctioned event between the PGA Tour and the DP World Tour. The first year, it was Xander at -7, beat Kurt Kitayama by 1 stroke. He was 11 back after Thursday, but he shot a 65 on Friday, 66 on Saturday, both the best rounds of the day to get him in. He entered in elite form with 5 straight top 20 finishes, and he won the Travelers previous to that. So those were the 2 with the PGA players predominantly playing in this field. In 2021, Min Woo beat Dietrich and Fitzpatrick in a playoff. He had 1 top 20 finish on the season prior to winning, which actually happened to be the week before at the Irish Open. He was T18 that week. Then Rai won at -11, as I mentioned, and Wiesberger beat Benjamin Herbert at -22. And yes, it was Tommy Fleetwood who Aaron Rai beat. So Tommy Fleetwood has actually played really well at this course, and that's going to be impactful in terms of his odds this week. He's always boosted up on the betting board, but he'll be even more boosted up this week based on good form and excellent course history at the Renaissance Club. And to take a look back last year, obviously it was played at Royal Liverpool, the Open Championship, and Brian Harman ended up winning. But just to take a look at the top 10 last year, everyone who finished inside the top 10 made the cut at the Open Championship. Rory ended up coming T6. Bobby Mack was T71. Lingmerth, who was 3rd last year, qualified into the Open Championship based on his performance, came T68. Scheffler came T23, who was 3rd a year ago. Benny Ann was T23, and so was Nikolai Højgaard T23. They all tied for, they were all T3 or T6 at the Scottish, ended up coming T23 at the Open. Hatton was T20. Poston was T41. Fleetwood was top 10, and Tom Kim was in that log jam in 2nd place at the Open Championship going in. Overall, this is a 7,237-yard course, fescue greens, and obviously there's a ton of fescue just lingering off the fairway, and guys last year were able to draw pretty good lies out of it, but you can't really control spin out of it that well. It's a par 70. There are 5 par 3s on the course. The average distance is 187 yards. 4 of the holes on the course own a double or worse rate of 2% or more, and they're all the front 9 par 4s. And the average distance on the par 4s, all 10 of them, is 454 yards. There are 3 par 5s on the course, with the average distance being 590 yards. And to take a little bit of a closer look at those, one of them plays right at 600. They're all in that 575 to 600 range. The eagle rate is all sub 2% on them, and the birdie rate is 32%, 32%, and 42%. That would be on the third hole. The 600, it's funny that the 600-yard par 5, the longest one, ends up playing the easiest hole on the course. Rory took full advantage of the longest one, playing number 3 at 5 under par. He made eagle in round 1 there last season. And if we're looking for a DraftKings streak this week, the vast majority of birdie streaks will come on the back 9 as it opens with 7 straight holes that play easier than course average. The problem when mining for streaks is that both of the 9s end with really difficult holes. The 5 toughest holes on the property kind of wrap around everything. And we take a closer look into how the layout goes. You have number 2 is the 3rd most difficult on the course. Number 18 is the most difficult. And 7, 8, and 9 are 6th, 2nd, and 4th, all of them playing over par. So there's no real advantage depending on which side of the draw that you end up getting on. Let's jump over to Fantasy National right now and take a look at some of the accuracy and greens regulation stats. There's not a ton of data from the Renaissance, but I believe they will have shot length this time around, which is, helpful when trying to mine some research with everything. You see driving accuracy is much lower here than your standard PGA Tour event. A lot of that has to do with 2 years ago when it played supremely difficult. Although Gus got up to 40 miles per hour in the 4th round a year ago. 48% is the driving accuracy, greens regulation around 60%, scrambling a little bit lower than it normally is here. So if you can hit your greens regulation, you're going to be pretty good because the 3 putts per round is a little bit lower than you would expect, but you can really chop off a lot of this course with just bombing it out there. And if you can hit the fairways, it's going to roll for ages. If you can draw some luck in the fescue, you're going to be good to go. You can see that the average driving distance is about 10 yards higher than it is at your standard PGA Tour event. And taking a more in-depth look at the field, it's a really good field. As I mentioned before, no Scotty Scheffler, but we're going to get Rory and Colin, Xander, who's won this event before, Ludwig, Victor, Tommy, Hideki, Fitz, Tom Kim, Theegala, Thomas, Sungjae, Clark, and then you got your splattering of Euro guys, and even that mid-tier of like Connors and Bezadenhout. Bezadenhout has wins on the DP World Tour, so maybe he is someone to give more of a shout to this week. Although we have seen in the 2 years of this tournament that the PGA Tour guys have really, they are the cream of the crop in terms of the world. The cream rises to the top, brother. And we've seen that throughout the course of the years. Bobby Mack was sort of the outlier last year, but he has a win on the PGA Tour already this time around. Grant Forrest came 11th last year, and then Ewan Ferguson, who's playing really well in Munich this week. Ryan Fox. So you had a splattering of some of these top-end Euro guys, not even top-end Euro guys, just some of the Euro guys who are more familiar with links golf. Jordan L. Smith was another one. Jordan Smith, you can just call him, but he was playing much better golf at this time last year than he is going into it this year. But then you see your Ben Griffins and Tom Hoagies, and Home is an elite player, but Lee Hodges was another one. JT Poston and Nick Taylor were all players who ended up getting up there, and then you had like your mid-tier guys inside the top 25. Langeskew, Thorbjorn, Yannick Paul. So don't be afraid to take a few Euros. You would think on DraftKings, and depending on what the odds are this time around, that they might present the better value going into this season. So maybe on Wednesday's show, because I don't believe there's a DP World Tour picks and bet show, because Sky is in his RV across America right now, that I'll try to take a more in-depth look at some of the European players. And that's what we're going to be doing on the First Look show with Jack and Tom, is taking a look at some of these under-the-radar players that maybe you just don't know a ton about. And going back to the year before, you see that Dietrich and Rasmus Højgaard ended up inside the top 10 as European players, but mainly, again, Doug Gim, Bezadenhout, Wyndham Clark. Jordan Smith played pretty well again. He's come inside the top 25 each of the past 2 years. Valimaki having a pretty decent week at the John Deere. We've seen him pop up a few times. He's made the cut each of the past 2 years. He has wins on the European Tour. So some of these guys that maybe are not normally on your radar could get a little bit of a boost this week. We try to take a look at the modeling for the week. It's tough to do because obviously different surfaces lead to different things, and time zone changes, a completely different style of course, and you're really going to have to keep up to date on how the weather is going to impact things. Who are some of the better wind players? And obviously you can just scroll down the left side of Fantasy National, take a look at super windy conditions and see how that goes. You could even sort by Open Championships if you want, although those are different tests. They're not always in Scotland, and sometimes you're going to get different stats mixed in because a non-windy Open Championship plays a little bit different than a windy, waterlogged type event. But just overall, taking a look at the past 12 rounds in my strokes gain model, which I usually have as my default setting, which you can see on the screen right now, really weights, total, approach, around the green, off the tee. I don't know why around the green is so high as a part of this, as opposed to off the tee, but we'll do that and rejig it just a little bit, but keep approach at 32% and see who the best players are. It's Rory, it's Colin. Aaron Rai rates out really well. He's gonna have to be a popular pick this week with a second place finish in Detroit. He might win John Deere, but probably at least come inside the top 10, returning to Europe where he's won, returning to Britain or the British Isles where he has won before, and obviously he's won at this course at the Scottish Open in the past. So maybe he can, and it seems like the putter is starting to come along a little bit. Davis Thompson, who's in the lead at the John Deere, rates in number 4. It's funny because this doesn't include any of the John Deere stats right now, and he still rates out 4th. Probably should have bet him. Didn't like his odds. I know Feinberg's on him, and I know there's a ton of people on him this week, so if my guys are kind of out of it, so I'm rooting for Davis Thompson to come through for people this week, and maybe he can cash an outright for some people. Build some good mo before we head overseas for some of the golf events. There's also an event at the Barbasol this week as well for the lesser tier players, the guys that didn't qualify for this. I'm not going to really be walking through that, but maybe Jeff and I will have some bets on Monday for the Barbasol. Xander, Hideki, Minwoo. Minwoo's playing a little bit better. Again, returning to a place where he has won in the past. Connors inside the top 10. So was Victor. Then you got Tommy, Keith, Tom Kim, Damon, Harmon, Bezadenhout, Hoagie. Jordan Smith still rates out pretty well in terms of the only PGA stats that we can see, but that's not a smorgasbord of stats that we're looking here. He made the cut at the PGA Championship. He made the cut at the Open last year. He was 12th at the Scottish, and then he was 20th at the US Open. Not quite sure how he is playing right now on the DP World Tour, but we can check that out by going to Jordan Smith. Official World Golf Rankings, if I can official World Golf Rankings and not try to make that look like Iowa, and type in to see how Jordan Smith is doing. How is Jordan Smith doing coming into this event? He missed the cut in Italy, so not great. He has no top 20s since he was second in Africa, in South Africa at the middle of March, the end of February. So it hasn't been a good run for Jordan Smith, but maybe getting back in these link style courses is exactly what he needs. Thomas, Sungjae, Bobby Mack are all up there in the strokes gain model. I need to see if I have a Scottish Open one. I always try to do this one more by feel, and we have seen that the guys who played the Travelers pretty well have done well here, although it was closer, I believe, last season in proximity. Where's Scottish? Do I have a Scottish Open? I feel like I should, but I don't. Short wedges, simple US Open, St. Andrews. Maybe it's under Genesis Scottish Open. It is not. So I think we're just going to try to take a look at who is playing really good golf coming in, because that has been a pretty good predictor of who is going to come up near the top of this tournament, and maybe try to take a look at some of the guys, some of the names that we saw from last year. We'll jump to, maybe they had it last year for ShotLink. I really thought there was ShotLink for this tournament, but no, there wasn't last year, and there wasn't the year before that. But, good players end up doing pretty well. That's sort of what we're seeing at the Scottish Open over time. Let's see, we have a UK player, Scheffler, obviously he's going to be up there a ton. Ben Ann has won at Wentworth in the past. Hatton has played pretty well. No Shane Lowry in this field, although is there a Shane Lowry in this field? I feel like there should be Shane Lowry in this field. No, he's not. Only Justin Lauer is in this field. So maybe Shane Lowry, maybe he decided to play, I don't know what the hell he's doing. Maybe he's saving it for the Irish Open. Who knows what's going on with Shane Lowry right now. But as we kind of take a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the field, I'll try to pick off some like Minwoo, Connors, and Aaron Rai, who are rating out near the top. And we might need to see how they're doing. Man, just the top 20s for Aaron Rai Or is this? Yeah, that is Aaron Rai. He's going to have another top 20 this week. He's been like Mr. Top 20 over the past month, and that includes the U.S. Open, where he ended up coming in 19th. Just tee to green. He's been absolutely lights out, and he's actually making putts for the first time in ages. I guess he went on that nice little run at Valero in Houston to close the Texas swing of things, but if he can actually putt well, we know that the irons are good. We know he's familiar with the surface. If his odds aren't bad, you might just have to jump on. If it's like 50-1 as an opener, I guess if he wins John Deere, comes in second, he might open at like 35 because they don't want to take on that liability knowing that he's going to be a very popular bet. Take a look at Corey Connors. He has had some decent putting weeks. He's had some terrible putting weeks as per usual with him, but when he putts well, he tends to putt okay. We'll see how he's done. He's played the Scottish twice, made the cut twice, and obviously finished inside the top 20 last year. This feels like it should be a good tournament for him, although the approach play at the Travelers was not great. His around the green started to improve vastly. We'll see if that's pure luck or if it's something that he's actually made an adjustment to going forward. Minwoo, we know that he plays links golf really well. He's just playing good golf right now, and even seeing his irons right around average, slightly above average, is such a flip from what we've seen from him over the past year, where he was just basically hitting his iron play was so bad, he was hitting himself out of tournaments. Obviously, he's always going to gain off the tee. Sometimes he can show up with an amazing short game and a really hot putter, but when you're not hitting your irons well, you need to have that great putting week, which he just wasn't doing. But he has seemingly turned that around. The approach play has been break even. If he can be slightly above average, again, he's going to be a contender here. It's all about, we talk a little bit about the what do we do with Rory, or what do we do with Scotty on a week-to-week basis when he comes in at 3-1. Rory is kind of the guy at this tournament, especially being the defending champion. And listen, yes, he didn't win the U.S. Open by missing those 2 short putts, but he is playing fantastic golf coming in, just taking a look at his results. He had a bit of a lag earlier on in the season, but he was still coming inside the top 25 basically every single week. And then since the Heritage, a win, he got the team win. He's come inside the top 15 of both the majors, 4th at the RBC Canadian Open. He feels more beatable, obviously, than Scotty does, who no one seems to be beating right now. But do you just want to pump on Rory and hopefully he defends his crown in Scotland? Or do you take a shot a little bit down the board and try to pepper this like 20 to 50 range? That's probably the route that I'm going to take because I don't normally go to the very top of the board in that sense. But it's an interesting conundrum that you're going to end up with this week, depending on where the odds shake out. And I would guess that Rory comes up near the top of the board. Which brings us to guess the odds for the Scottish Open. I just mentioned Rory. I think that he comes in as the betting favorite at 6-1, with Xander slightly behind him at 8-1. They could both be 7. They could be 4 and 6, depending on how the odds shake out. But I do think that there's a few guys in the middle tier that will get, I don't want to say overrated, but their odds will be shorter than they normally are because of the course history and the location that we're at going back to overseas, more European players. Basically, Rai and Bobby Mack are the 2 that I'm really thinking of here. After that, I have another tier of 3 players in the teens. I have Ludwig at 12-1, Colin and Vic both at 14-1. Don't really like that tier of players. It's the next tier down, depending on where these guys get listed. I have Tommy and Hideki both at 22-1. There is a chance that Tommy opens at like 18-1 because people will be lining up to bet him this week. We're not in America, therefore Tommy can win. People buy into that narrative that he can just do that, and all of a sudden he'll be at the top of people's betting cards, and that's where they'll start. I do think that Hideki will fall out and be around 22-1 and maybe fluctuate up or down depending on the interest in him this week. Fitz and Tom Kim, I have at 28-1, but again, they could open a little bit lower than that at 25 or 22. Tom Kim, obviously I mentioned, he's one of the 2 players each of the past 2 seasons who's come inside the top 10. And then you have Fitz, who's lost in a playoff here before, and just, he gets boosted up anytime that we go over to Europe. After that tier, I have Thigala at 30, JT, Sungjae at 35, Harmon at 40, Wyndham Clark at 45, and then you have Bobby Mack and Rai. I'm going to guess 40 for each of them. They could open at 50, they could open at 35, but that's the range that I'm looking at for those guys coming into it this week. This really feels like a more feel week for me, and I got to get off the schneid here because Sungjae just had a disastrous Saturday at the John Deere. So that's going to do it for the Pat Mayo Experience for the Scottish Open. We're going to have a tremendous amount of coverage on this on Mayo Media Network, so sub to that all week long, and then directly into Open Championship coverage, which I'm pretty excited for, being the year's final major. This is kind of like get back to go time for golf with these 2 weeks after a bit of a lull following the US Open. So I'm pretty excited. I hope you're excited too. FantasyNational.com/Mayo gets you 20% off. Code Mayo at Underdog Fantasy. And check out that Open Championship show I did with Blickle. It's on the back end of this audio podcast and will be a separate video up on Mayo Media Network. All right. Thank you all for watching. I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!